Story 1. I've been watching these security cameras for years. I've worked night security at the same place for a little over 4 years. It's an office complex, multiple connected buildings, long interior corridors, stairwells, storage areas, and a central atrium that echoes even when it's empty. Especially when it's empty. My shift starts at 10. By then, everyone's gone. No cleaning crew, no late meetings, no maintenance. Once the doors lock, the place belongs to the cameras and whoever's watching them. That's me. The control room is small. One desk, a wall of monitors, a chair that's just uncomfortable enough to keep you from falling asleep. I bring coffee, sometimes a book, but most nights I don't really do anything. I sit, I skim the screens, and I wait for the shift to end. People always assume you're staring intensely at every feed, like in the movies. You're not. You learn pretty quickly that if you actually tried to watch everything, you'd lose your mind. Instead, you develop a rhythm, a pattern. You glance, you cycle, you look for movement. If something doesn't move, your brain filters it out. That's important later. That night started like every other night. I logged in, checked the handover notes, and started cycling through the feeds automatically. Lobby, empty. West corridor, empty. Stairwell, empty. I didn't even slow down when I switched to the interior hallway camera on the 3rd floor. Not at first. I was halfway through switching to the next feed when I hesitated and flicked back. I couldn't have told you why. Nothing obvious was wrong with the image. The hallway lights were dimmed like always. The carpet pattern looked the same, no doors open, but something about it felt slightly misaligned. Like when you look at a familiar room and realize one piece of furniture has been moved just a few inches. I leaned forward in my chair. The image still looked empty. I stared at the far end of the hallway where the light didn't quite reach the corner. The shadows pooled there in a way that felt thicker than usual, not darker, just more defined. I squinted. For a moment, I thought I could make out a vertical shape. Not sharp enough to be anything specific, just a suggestion of something breaking up the symmetry of the space. I blinked a few times and leaned back. Long shifts mess with your eyes. I've mistaken reflections for movement before. Dust on lenses, compression artifacts. All of it can play tricks on you. I switched to another camera. Different hallway, different floor. Same feeling. Again, nothing obvious, but after a few seconds I felt that same hesitation, the same urge to look closer. Near one of the door frames, the shadow didn't sit quite right. It was too straight, too narrow. I leaned in again, closer to the screen this time. If I really focused, if I ignored everything else in the frame, I could almost convince myself I was looking at the outline of a person standing still. Almost. I laughed quietly to myself and shook my head. This was ridiculous. I hadn't slept well the night before. My brain was clearly filling in gaps that weren't there. I moved on. The next camera showed a stairwell, concrete steps, metal railing, no windows. Empty. Except, near the landing, the shadow cast by the railing looked heavier than it should have, like it was overlapping something. I felt a tightness in my chest that I didn't like. I cycled back to the first hallway. The shape was still there. It hadn't moved. It hadn't grown clearer. But now that I knew where to look, I couldn't stop seeing it. My brain kept trying to complete it. Head, shoulders, arms hanging loosely at the sides. That's when I realized something that unsettled me more than the shape itself. I hadn't noticed anything like this before because I'd never had a reason to look this closely. The cameras hadn't changed. The lighting hadn't changed. Only my attention had. I stood up and walked a slow circle around the control room, trying to reset myself. I splashed some water on my face in the small sink and took a few deep breaths. When I sat back down, I avoided those cameras at first. I focused on exterior feeds, parking lots, loading docks, places where nothing ever happens. Eventually, curiosity won. I went back to the interior cameras, slower this time. The shapes were still there, not clearer, not moving, just consistent. That's when I decided to check the old footage. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, I just needed to know if this was new. I pulled up a random clip from earlier that night. The same hallway, the same corner, the same subtle disruption in the shadows. I scrubbed back a few hours. Still there. The previous night. Still there. I picked a random date from weeks ago. There it was again. Once I knew where to look, I could see it in every clip I checked. Always far back in the frame. Always positioned in a way that made sense for the camera angle. Never centered, never obvious. It blended in perfectly. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the screens without really seeing them. I kept thinking that once you decide something is there, your brain will do the rest of the work for you. You start confirming your own suspicion. That's how people end up convinced they saw things they didn't. So I tried to do the opposite. I forced myself to stop looking for the shape. I went back to my routine. I cycled through the cameras at my normal pace. I looked for doors opening, lights turning on, anything that actually mattered. But every time I passed one of the interior feeds, my eyes went straight to the same places, and I didn't have to work as hard anymore. The shape was easier to see now, not by much, just enough that I didn't have to squint. The contrast between it and the background had sharpened slightly, like the camera had adjusted its exposure. On one hallway feed, I could tell which way it was facing, toward the camera. I felt a chill run through me, the kind that starts in your shoulders and slides down your spine. I checked the timestamp. Live. I switched to the next interior camera. There it was again, closer than before. It still wasn't doing anything dramatic. It wasn't moving fast. It wasn't reaching for the lens or waving or making any kind of gesture. It was just standing there, occupying space more confidently than it had earlier. I flipped through more feeds, faster now. Every interior camera had it somewhere in the frame, sometimes near a doorway, sometimes at the end of a corridor, sometimes half lit by an overhead fixture, always positioned naturally, like it knew exactly where to stand to be seen. I stopped on a camera that covered a long corridor leading toward the central atrium. The figure stood at the far end, clearer than I'd seen it yet. The outline was unmistakably human now. Head, shoulders, torso, arms hanging loosely at its sides. Still no facial features. The camera adjusted again, sharpening slightly as it would for any subject moving closer. The figure took a step forward. Not suddenly, not aggressively, just one slow, deliberate step. I felt my heart start to pound. I could hear it in my ears, louder than the hum of the monitors. I glanced at the other screens. On each one, the figure was closer than it had been moments ago. Not walking through hallways, not traveling between floors, just nearer to the cameras themselves. I switched to one of the feeds closest to my location. The figure filled more of the frame now. The camera struggled to focus, the image sharpening and softening as it tried to resolve details that didn't quite settle. The figure's head was tilted slightly upward. It was looking directly into the lens. I reached for the radio on my desk, then hesitated. What exactly was I going to say? I think there's something on the cameras. Didn't feel like a sentence that would survive being spoken out loud. Before I could decide what to do, every screen went black at once. Not static, not interference, just clean, sudden darkness. The room felt impossibly quiet. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then one feed came back online. It wasn't a hallway. It wasn't a stairwell. It was the control room. I was on the screen. Then there was a knock on the door.
Story 2. I worked late one night.
I've been debating whether to post this, mostly because it sounds unreal when I try to explain it. But it did happen, and a few people at my job can confirm parts of it. I'm writing this now because I can't stop replaying it in my head. I work at a fairly normal office, accounting, project management, that kind of thing. The important part is that nobody works late. Ever. It's not one of those places with a grind culture or late nights. People leave at 5, sometimes earlier. If you're still in the building after 6, it's usually because you forgot something and had to run back in. A few years ago, there was a guy who worked there. I won't use his real name, but let's call him Mark. He wasn't close with anyone, but people knew him. Quiet, kept to himself. One day, he just stopped showing up. We later found out he'd been fired. No goodbye email, no farewell lunch. After that, nobody ever heard from him again. Over time, he just became one of those names that occasionally came up as a joke. Remember Mark? No, exactly. Last week, I stayed late for the first time since I started working there. There was a mistake in a report that needed fixing before the next morning, and I figured I'd stay an extra half hour and just get it over with. Everyone else left like usual, coats on, lights clicking off. By the time it was just me, the office felt different. Not scary, just hollow. The ventilation sounded louder. My footsteps echoed more than usual. I remember thinking how strange it was that I had never seen the office like this before. There were a few small things I noticed, but I didn't think much of them at the time. The light in the kitchenette was already on when I went to get water. Someone had left a mug in the sink. The microwave display was still warm, like it had been used recently. I assumed someone from another department had just left later than usual. I finished my work and decided to clean my mug before heading out. I went back to the kitchenette, turned on the tap, and looked up at the mirror mounted above the sink. That's when I saw him. For a moment, my brain didn't understand what I was seeing. In the mirror, behind me, was a man standing just inside the doorway of the kitchenette. He wasn't close. He wasn't moving toward me. He was just standing there, staring at me. I didn't recognize him. He looked thin, pale. His clothes were worn and slightly too big, like they didn't really belong to him. His expression mirrored mine, wide-eyed, frozen, like he was just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. I remember thinking very clearly, there is a man in my office, and I am completely alone with him. That's when the fear hit. I turned around. The doorway was empty. I didn't investigate. I didn't call out. I closed my laptop without saving, grabbed my bag, and left the office with the lights still on. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my manager everything. To his credit, he didn't laugh or brush it off. He went quiet for a moment, then asked me a few very specific questions. Where I'd been standing, what time it was, which lights were on. He called facilities and asked them to do a walkthrough of the floor later that day. At first, they didn't find anything. Most of the storage rooms and offices looked exactly the way they always did. Later that day, they found it. There's a small space behind one of the old storage rooms. It's not on any floor plan, just a narrow gap where some renovation work was never properly sealed off. Inside, they found a thin mattress, folded clothes, empty food containers, and a power strip running to an outlet someone had clearly modified. Someone had been living there. What made my stomach drop was the last thing they found. An old company badge, worn smooth around the edges. The photo was faded, but the name was still readable. It was Mark's.
No one knows how long he'd been living there. Months, maybe years. He must have learned the schedule, known exactly when the building would be empty. The only reason anyone ever found the space is because I stayed late that one night. By the time they went back the next day, he was gone. I don't think he was trying to scare me. If anything, I think we were both just somewhere we weren't supposed to be.
Story 3. I worked night shift at a convenience store. I worked nights at a convenience store in my early 20s. Nothing dramatic ever really happened there, which is why this one night still sticks with me so clearly. Most night shifts were dead quiet. After midnight, you'd maybe get one customer an hour, if that. I usually worked with one other person, but we weren't always together. One of us would be up front, the other in the back stocking shelves, counting inventory, or working in the cooler. One night, around 2 a.m., a guy came in who immediately made my stomach tighten. There was nothing I could point to and say, that's the reason. He wasn't yelling, didn't say anything sexual or threatening. He just stood too close to the counter. He took a long time to move, asked questions that felt unnecessary. Slow night? You here all night? You get many people coming through this late? I answered politely but briefly. I remember watching his hands more than his face. He wandered around the store for a while, picked things up, put them back, never brought anything to the counter. Eventually he left without buying anything. As soon as the door closed behind him, the feeling passed. The store went quiet again, and I honestly forgot about him pretty quickly. Night shifts mess with your nerves, and I didn't want to read too much into a weird vibe. What I didn't think about at the time was that my co-worker hadn't been on the floor at all. He'd been in the back the entire time, working in the storage area. From that guy's perspective, I was completely alone in the store. When our shift ended, my co-worker asked if I could give him a ride home. His car was in the shop, and it was on my way. I said yes, without thinking twice. The parking lot was completely empty. It was one of those strip mall lots, big and open, but at that hour it was just darkness and my car under a single light, the only car there. We locked up together. He walked ahead of me to warm up the car and throw his bag into the back seat, while I stayed behind to finish pulling the security gate down. I had just turned the key when I heard him shout my name. Not yelling for help exactly, more like sharp and urgent. I ran toward the car, and my co-worker was standing at the open back door, frozen for half a second. Then he moved. The guy from the store was in the back seat. He was half lying across it, like he tried to stay hidden. When my co-worker opened the door, the guy startled and started scrambling, and that's when my co-worker grabbed him. There was no talking, no hesitation. My co-worker yanked him out of the car by his jacket and slammed him back against the side of it. The guy fought for a second, trying to pull away, and my co-worker shoved him hard enough that he stumbled and fell. My co-worker didn't chase him. He just stood between the guy and me, yelling at him to get the hell away. The guy got up and ran across the parking lot and disappeared into the dark. We called the cops. They showed up, took a report, looked around, but there wasn't much they could do. They never found him. It wasn't until later, when everything calmed down, that the details really sank in. He knew which car was mine because it was the only one there. He waited because he thought I was alone. And he was already in the back seat when we walked out. If my co-worker hadn't gone ahead to warm up the car, if I'd walked out first and gotten into the driver's seat. I quit night shifts not long after that. I still get a bad feeling sometimes when I unlock my car in an empty parking lot.
Story 4. The Room at the Care Home. I was 19 when this happened. It was my first real job, just a summer position, and I remember being mostly nervous about doing something wrong. I didn't want to mess anything up. I didn't want to be that summer worker people talked about later. I worked evenings and occasional nights at a care home. Not a hospital, not hospice, just a long-term care facility for elderly residents who needed help around the clock. The building itself was old but well kept. Long hallways, soft lighting. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Most nights were quiet, predictable. You learned the routines quickly. Medication rounds, checks, documentation, and then hours of nothing but the hum of the building and the occasional call button. One of the first things they told me during my introduction was that the call buttons were connected per bed, not per room. Each bed had its own panel, its own signal. If a light went off, you knew exactly which resident it came from. They were very clear about one rule. If a call button goes off, you check. Every time. Even if you're sure it's nothing. There was one room everyone referred to without really thinking about it. It was a shared room with 2 bed spaces. One of the beds had been empty for a while. I never asked why. People come and go in places like that. Sometimes they move rooms. Sometimes they don't come back. The call button from that empty bed space would go off some nights. Not every night, not on a schedule, just often enough that people noticed. The first time it happened during one of my shifts, I asked the nurse I was working with what I was supposed to do. She barely looked up from her paperwork. "Just go check," she said. "It's probably a wiring issue. That bed's empty, but you still have to look." That became the standard explanation. A wiring issue. Old building, old system, nothing to worry about. And honestly, after a while, it really wasn't. You'd walk down the hallway, open the door, turn on the small nightlight, and see the same thing every time. One empty bed, neatly made. No one there. The other bed occupied by an elderly woman who had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. She was total assist, completely immobile. She couldn't get out of bed on her own, couldn't sit up without help. She also barely spoke. Sometimes she'd make small sounds, but actual words were rare. When the call button from the empty bed went off, she never reacted. She slept through it, or stared at the ceiling, or just lay there, breathing steadily. After a few weeks, the call button from that bed became part of the background. It would ring, someone would, and one of us would go clear it. Nothing ever changed. It was summer, and the nights were warm. The kind of nights where time stretches out and everything feels slightly unreal. I remember feeling strangely calm during those shifts, like the world outside had gone quiet and we were the only ones awake. That night started like all the others. I was doing my rounds, checking rooms, poking my head into doorways. Most residents were asleep, some were awake but quiet. The hallway lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the floor. As I passed the room with the empty bed, I noticed something that made me slow down. The call button hadn't gone off. I know that sounds small, it sounds stupid even, but I had worked enough shifts by then to notice patterns. That bed almost always rang at least once during the night, sometimes more. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe someone had finally fixed the wiring, maybe tonight was just different. The door to the room was slightly open. It usually wasn't. We kept doors either fully open or fully closed. This one was just ajar, enough to see the soft glow of the nightlight inside. I stood there for a second, hand on the doorframe, listening. Nothing. No movement, no voices, just the quiet breathing of the building. I pushed the door open a little more and looked inside. The empty bed was still empty. Sheets neatly tucked, pillow untouched. Then I looked at the other bed. The woman was sitting up. Not all the way upright, but enough that she was clearly on the edge of the bed, feet on the floor, hands resting loosely in her lap. Her head was tilted forward, chin almost touching her chest. I froze. I had never seen her sit up before, not once. It always took two people to reposition her, and even then, she barely moved on her own. For a moment, I wondered if I was remembering wrong. Maybe she could sit up sometimes. Maybe I just hadn't seen it before. I stepped into the room. "Hi," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Are you all right?" She didn't respond. She stayed exactly like that, staring down at the floor. I took another step closer. My heart was starting to beat faster, but I kept telling myself there was a logical explanation. There always is. "Do you need anything?" I asked. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her neck twisted slightly as she did, like it took effort. She raised her face and looked straight at me. Her eyes were open wide, focused in a way I had never seen before. She held my gaze. And then she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, strained, like it hadn't been used in a long time. "She isn't here anymore." For a second, I didn't understand what she'd said. Then it hit me. The name she used belonged to the woman who had been in the empty bed. I don't remember deciding to run. I just remember suddenly being very aware of how fast my heart was beating and how wrong it felt to still be standing in that room. I took a step back, then another. I didn't say anything else to her. I didn't ask what she meant. I turned around and walked out of the room, then immediately broke into a run down the hallway. I went straight to the staff room. I must have looked bad, because one of the nurses asked me what was wrong before I even opened my mouth. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but it came out messy and rushed. I kept repeating that she was sitting up, that she talked, that she said a name. The nurse I was working with that night let out a short laugh, not in a mean way, more like a reflex. "That's not possible," she said. "She can't sit up on her own, and she doesn't talk like that." I told her I knew, that I'd never seen her do either of those things before. That was why I was freaking out. Another nurse stood up and grabbed her keys. "Let's just go check," she said. It hadn't even been 2 minutes. We walked back down the hallway together. The lights were still dimmed. Everything looked exactly the same as it always did. When we reached the room, the door was fully closed. The nurse opened it. The woman was lying in her bed, tucked in neatly, on her back, hands resting where they always did. Her breathing was slow and steady. She was snoring softly. The bed beside her was empty, exactly as it always was. The nurse checked her vitals. Normal. She adjusted the blanket, smoothed it down, and looked at me with a small, tired smile. "She's been asleep," she said, "probably for a while." I didn't know what to say. I stood there, staring at the space where I had just seen her sitting. There were no signs of movement, no messed up sheets, no indication that anyone had been up at all. The nurse asked if I was okay. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. We went back to the staff room. They offered me water. Someone made a joke about how night shifts mess with your head, especially when you're new. I laughed weakly, even though I didn't feel like laughing at all. The rest of the shift passed without anything else happening. The call button from the empty bed didn't ring again at all after that.
Story 5. My influencer neighbour. The worst part about apartment living isn't the noise, it's the visibility.
Not just the fact that people can see you, but that, without meaning to, you start seeing far too much of them. You learn things you never asked to know. Habits, routines, timetables. The man across the courtyard, one floor below me, for instance, I don't know what he does for work, but I know exactly what he does when his girlfriend leaves in the morning. I know this because I've accidentally looked out my kitchen window enough times to see him sitting on his bed, laptop balanced on his bare thighs, tissues stacked beside him. I've always wondered what kind of job allows that many breaks. But he wasn't the strange one. That was the woman living above him. Her apartment faced the courtyard too. 2 windows, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. I noticed her about a week after I moved in, sometime last autumn. I wasn't in a great place then. The apartment I'd moved from was bigger, nicer, in a better area, but it had belonged to my boyfriend, who had recently informed me he wasn't my boyfriend anymore. So I'd taken what I could afford and tried not to think too hard about it. I was unpacking cutlery when I glanced out the window and saw her. She stood between her white curtains, holding her phone up toward the glass as if trying to get better reception. She stared intensely at the screen. A strand of blonde hair fell into her face and she brushed it away with practiced ease. That's when I realized she was taking photos of herself. The setup was perfect. Soft, indirect light reflected off my building's pale facade. A neatly arranged bookshelf behind her. Hair styled, makeup done. What confused me was her face. There was no expression at all. No smile, no movement. She looked like she was taking passport photos. I watched for a few seconds, then went back to unpacking. When I looked again, she was gone. The next morning, she was there again. Different outfit, same pose, same blank expression. It was a Saturday, early, and she was already dressed and filming. I remember thinking she seemed unnaturally alert for that hour. I never ran into her in the stairwell. In fact, I rarely saw any neighbours at all, which suited me fine. I didn't have much energy for politeness back then. A few weeks later, I started a new job. The hours were brutal. My alarm rang at 5:45 every morning. One morning, half asleep, I stood in the kitchen scooping coffee into the filter and glanced out the window. It was still dark, the sky just beginning to lighten. And she was there, standing motionless between the curtains. At first, all I saw was a silhouette, a shape. I stepped back into the shadows of my own kitchen, heart racing, unwilling to turn on the light. I told myself it could be anything, a coat rack, laundry, a trick of the light. Then the sun rose. As the first rays hit the building across the courtyard, the apartment opposite slowly filled with light. It was her, fully dressed, immaculate, hair braided, outfit perfectly styled. She stood there the entire time, unmoving, until she raised her phone and began taking pictures. Her face never changed. That night I told a friend about it over drinks. I described the stillness, the timing, the way she seemed to be waiting for the light. My friend asked me to describe her clothes. Then she opened Instagram. She showed me a photo posted earlier that day. It was the woman from the window, wearing exactly what I'd seen her in that morning, smiling. I don't follow many influencers. Something about the constant performance makes me uneasy. But this woman had around 40,000 followers. Her feed was immaculate, stylish, controlled, flirtatious in a careful, curated way. As I scrolled, I recognized more outfits, more mornings. Every photo showed her smiling. That didn't match what I'd seen. After that, I paid closer attention. Days passed where she didn't appear in the window at all, but new photos kept appearing online, always shot in the same light, same angle, same framing. Eventually, I noticed it. The smile. It was identical in every photo, not similar, the same. She wasn't smiling for the camera. She was adding the smile afterward. That explained everything. The identical angles, the rigid posture, the lack of expression while filming. It made sense, and it made my skin crawl. One Sunday evening, after I'd spent the night at someone else's place, I came home to heavy clouds hanging low over the courtyard. I turned toward the kitchen window and froze. She was staring directly into my apartment, not at her phone, at me. Her face was blank, empty, watching. I pretended not to notice and walked away, heart pounding, inventing explanations. Coincidence, bad timing, nothing unusual. But I stopped looking out the window after that.
I started staying elsewhere more often. I Googled her during a lunch break. There was very little information. No photos of her outside the apartment. No candid shots. No sightings. All collaborations. All indoors. I found a platform she used, an app that connected brands and influencers automatically. No meetings. No human contact. Just metrics, value scores, deliverables. The thought of it made me uneasy, so I bought curtains. That evening, as I struggled to hang them, the sun broke through the clouds and flooded my kitchen with warm light. I laughed and, without thinking, took a photo of myself in the window. The lighting was flattering, the angle forgiving. I posted it. Minutes later, I noticed her curtains across the courtyard were open. The apartment was dark, empty. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications, new comments, from accounts I didn't recognize, strings of numbers, empty profiles. They all said the same thing. Smile. Why don't you smile? Come on, smile. There were 24 of them. I locked my account immediately. That evening, I sat by the window, furious, determined not to be chased out of my own home. Hours passed. Darkness fell. I scrolled through her comments. The same accounts were there, asking her for something, demanding it, saying she'd promised. I felt a wave of sympathy. I messaged her. Do you need help? It showed as seen. Then she replied, smile. They don't like it when you don't. I looked up. She stood there, barely visible in the dark, phone raised, screen lighting her empty face. My phone vibrated again. They want you to smile. I moved out that night. Later, unable to sleep, I saw a notification. A new story. A dark, blurry photo taken from her window. Of my kitchen. Of me. The story was deleted minutes later. I still don't know why she posted it. As a warning? A plea? Or an offering? All I know is this. I will never live across from a window like that again. And if you ever notice someone watching you from theirs, make sure you don't smile back. Story 6. I thought the chat was joking. I stream most nights. Nothing dramatic, just me, a game, and a small familiar chat that keeps me company while the rest of the world is asleep. That night felt no different from any other. It was late, well past midnight, and I'd been playing longer than I planned to. My eyes were heavy, my hands moving on autopilot, the headset tight enough that the rest of the apartment might as well not exist. I wasn't really reading chat anymore. I was just playing. When I finally paused the game and leaned back in my chair, I said my usual goodnight. Thanks for hanging out. Same routine as always. Before clicking end stream, I glanced at chat one last time.
more out of habit than anything else. A few messages immediately caught my eye. "Did you see that? What was that in the closet? Behind you, in the wardrobe?" I laughed. I told them they were awful for trying to scare me right before bed. I joked about how bored they must be. To play along, I spun my chair slightly so the camera showed more of the room behind me. "You mean this closet?" I said, standing up. I walked over, pulled the wardrobe door open wide, and stepped aside so Chat could see clearly. Nothing. Just coats, a laundry bag, shoes lined up exactly the way I always keep them. I rolled my eyes, wished everyone good night again, and ended the stream. I slept fine. The next day, the messages stayed in the back of my mind, not because I believed them, but because they were oddly specific. Chat trolls usually escalate, pile on, get louder. This had felt restrained. That afternoon, more curious than concerned, I opened the recording of the stream. I skipped ahead, watching myself play, watching Chat scroll by. At first, nothing seemed off. Then, about 20 minutes before I ended the stream, I noticed movement behind me. The wardrobe door shifted, just slightly. I leaned closer to the screen. The door opened slowly, carefully, like someone was trying not to make a sound. A man stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't look around in panic. He moved like someone who knew exactly where he was. He paused for a moment, standing just behind my chair, right at the edge of the camera's view, as if he was watching my screen. I was wearing headphones, talking to Chat, completely absorbed in the game. I had no idea he was there. The man crossed the room, opened my apartment door, and walked out. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. I rewound it and watched again. The same thing happened. No cuts, no glitches, no distortion. Just a man calmly leaving my apartment while I sat less than 2 meters away, completely unaware. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. I went straight to the front door. It was unlocked. I don't remember unlocking it. I don't remember opening it at any point during the stream. I locked it, then checked it again, and again. My hands were shaking. I sat on my couch for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it had to be staged somehow, even though I knew it wasn't. Trying to remember if I'd noticed anything strange earlier that night. I couldn't. The only explanation that made any sense was also the most unsettling one. He must have realized he was being watched, not by me, by everyone else. The stream didn't protect me because it was recording. It protected me because someone was watching in real time. All I can think about now is how long he'd been there before that moment, and what might have happened if I'd ended the stream just a few minutes earlier.
Story 7. My sister became an influencer. My sister always liked posting things online. Nothing extreme, just small, ordinary moments. Photos of her coffee, outfit videos, short clips from her apartment. It all felt harmless. So when her account started growing, no one was surprised. She was good at it, comfortable on camera, consistent. When she told us she was moving to another city to focus on content, it didn't sound alarming. Plenty of people do that now. At first, nothing seemed wrong. She posted every day. Morning routines, daily vlogs, late-night talks. She looked the same as always. Happy, relaxed, like everything was finally working out. But she stopped answering texts. At first, it was just delayed replies. Then unread messages. Then nothing at all. Calls went straight to voicemail. When I commented under one of her posts asking if she was coming home for our mum's birthday, the comment disappeared within minutes.
Not argued with, not replied to. Just gone, like it had never been there. Weeks passed. She didn't show up for birthdays. She didn't come home for holidays. She didn't acknowledge family group chats. But the content never stopped. Every single day, like clockwork. That's when I started noticing small things. The same outfit appearing in multiple videos, weeks apart. The same lighting. The same angle of sunlight hitting the wall behind her bed. One video showed her making breakfast. Another, posted days later, showed the exact same breakfast again. Same plate, same mug. Even the same time on the clock behind her. People in the comments loved it. They said things like, "So comforting," and "Your routine helps my anxiety," and "I love how consistent you are." I decided to visit her. I still had the address from when she moved. The building was modern, clean, quiet. Her name was still on the mailbox. I knocked. No answer. I rang the bell. Still nothing. But I could hear something inside. A low, steady hum, like electronics running. I spoke to the building manager. He checked his system and frowned. "Moen's been living in that unit for a while," he said. I told him that couldn't be right. My sister posted from there every day. He showed me the logs. The apartment had been rented for 3 months, then vacated. No water usage, no electricity spikes, no recorded access. "It's basically a studio," he said. "Not really meant to be lived in." That night, my sister's account uploaded a new video. Same apartment, same angle. She was wearing the outfit from her very first viral post. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the reflection in the window behind her. It wasn't her. It was someone standing just out of frame, watching. I started digging. Old interviews, archived live streams, industry articles. That's when I found it. A small press release from a content management firm, barely shared, almost buried. They described a pilot program for creators who were burnt out. A system that could schedule content, respond to comments, generate new videos and maintain engagement. All using archived footage, voice samples, facial mapping and behavioral patterns. The creators only had to do one thing: train it. That was when my sister stopped coming home. Her apartment wasn't empty because something happened suddenly. It was empty because it was never meant to be lived in. It was a set. A place where the system learned how she moved, how she spoke, how she smiled. Once it had enough, she wasn't needed anymore. I found her months later, not online, in real life. She was listed under a different name at a private wellness facility outside the city. She wasn't sick. She wasn't restrained. She just looked relieved. When I asked her why she never came back, she said, "I don't have to anymore." When I asked about the videos, she smiled and said, "They're doing better without me." Her account is still active, still posting every day, still replying in her voice, still gaining followers. People say she seems more present now than ever, and maybe they're right. Because whatever version of my sister the world wanted, it didn't need the real one to keep going.
Story 8. The woman below heard me at night. When I moved into the apartment, I told myself it was temporary. That's what you say when you're 40 and starting over. The place was on the 4th floor of an older building, the kind with thin walls, radiators that clanked in winter, and a stairwell that always smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and dust. The wallpaper in the hall had yellowed at the corners. The elevator groaned like it resented every passenger. I liked it immediately. Not because it was beautiful, it wasn't,
but because it was quiet. After the divorce, quiet felt like a gift. No one asking where I'd been, no one sighing when I forgot something, no television murmuring in the background, just rain against the window and the low hum of the fridge. I work regular hours, accounting. Numbers don't argue back. I get up at 6:30, shower, leave at 7:20. I'm home by 5. Dinner is usually something microwaved and eaten at the kitchen table with a podcast playing softly. Routine is important to me. It makes the days manageable. The first week passed without incident. On the 8th day, someone knocked on my door. She was small, maybe mid-70s, white hair pinned neatly back, a blue cardigan buttoned all the way up. She smelled faintly of lavender and furniture polish. "I live below you," she said. "Ingrid." Her voice was gentle, apologetic. "I just wanted to ask, could you maybe walk a little softer at night?" I blinked. "At night?" "Yes, around 2, sometimes 3. Quite heavy steps." I almost smiled. "I'm asleep by 11, I said. "I don't wake up until my alarm." She studied my face, not suspiciously, just carefully. "Well," she said softly, "someone does." I dismissed it. Old buildings make noises, pipes expand, wood shifts, sound travels strangely. But 3 nights later, she knocked again. This time, she looked tired. "It's not just walking," she said. "It sounds like furniture, something being dragged, and talking." "Talking?" She hesitated. A man's voice. My stomach tightened. "I live alone." She nodded slowly. "I know." That night, I barely slept. I lay still in bed, listening. The building settled around me. The radiator ticked once. Wind pressed against the window. Nothing else. When my alarm rang at 6:30, I felt foolish. The next evening, there was a note pushed through my mail slot. She had written down the times. 2:13 a.m., pacing. 3:40 a.m., dragging noise. 4:05 a.m., shouting. The handwriting was neat, careful. I checked my phone. Sleep tracker. Deep sleep, 1:58 a.m. to 4:47 a.m. No steps recorded. Still, something inside me shifted. I've had episodes before. After the divorce, there were nights I didn't remember clearly. Once, I woke up standing in the kitchen with no memory of leaving the bed. I blamed stress, or whiskey, or both. Stress does things to you. Maybe I was walking in my sleep. Maybe I was worse than I thought. I bought a small camera and set it on my dresser. "Just to be sure," I muttered. That night, I slept lightly, waiting for something inside me to rise. Morning came. I checked the footage. At 2:11 a.m., I was in bed. At 2:12, still in bed. At 2:13, the bedroom door slowly opened. The camera didn't capture the hallway. The timestamp ticked forward. 2:17, 2:24, 2:36. The door remained open. At 3:02 a.m., I sat up. I didn't remember doing that. I swung my legs over the side. I stood, and I walked out of frame. The video ended at 5:58. My alarm goes off at 6:30. 2.5 hours missing. I didn't confront the neighbor again. Instead, I started doubting everything. I began locking my bedroom door from the inside. I placed a chair under the handle. I put flour on the hallway floor to see footprints. In the morning, the flour was disturbed, but not by my bedroom door, by the front door, as if someone had stood there, or waited. 3 nights later, the knocking came again. Not at my door. From below, a broom handle striking the ceiling. Bang! 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 Stop! Ingrid's voice trembled from beneath the floorboards. I woke up startled in my bed. I hadn't moved. I hadn't spoken. Yet she was reacting to something. The following afternoon, I went downstairs. Ingrid opened the door before I knocked. We looked at each other for a long moment. "I think it's me," I said. "I might be sleepwalking." She held my gaze. I saw it then. Fear. "Come in," she said. Her apartment felt smaller than mine. Lower ceiling, warmer air. We sat at her kitchen table. "I just want to hear it," I said. "If I'm wrong." She nodded. We waited.
Rain tapped softly against her window. A clock ticked somewhere behind us. Minutes stretched. I almost said I was sorry. Then, a step. Slow, heavy, directly above us. We both looked up. Another step. Measured. Not the uncertain shuffle of someone confused. Deliberate. Back and forth. Back and forth. My mouth went dry. "It's not you," Ingrid whispered. "No." The ceiling creaked faintly with each step. Ingrid's hands trembled around her mug. "That's not pipes," she said. Above us, something dragged across the floor. Long. Wood against wood. A sound followed. Low. Almost conversational. A man's voice. Not shouting. Not angry. Just speaking. Another step. Slower now. Directly above Ingrid's head. We both knew what was there. Nothing. My apartment was directly above us, and I was sitting in a kitchen chair, listening to something walk. The steps stopped. Silence pressed down, thick and heavy. We waited. One final step, right in the center of the apartment, as if it had chosen the place to stand. And then, nothing. The building settled into a stillness that felt wrong, too complete. Ingrid slowly released my sleeve. "It's quiet now," she said. I nodded. Above us, my apartment waited. Dark, silent, occupied. And sooner or later, I would have to go back up there. Alone.
Story 9. The Homebody.
I had always been good at not being noticed. Not in a dramatic way, not in a sad way. It had simply always been easy for people to overlook me. In school, teachers sometimes forgot to collect my homework. At work, I could join a meeting, speak once, and slip back into silence, without anyone remembering I had been there. It never hurt. In some ways, it felt like a skill. As the world shifted toward remote work, deliveries, and digital systems, I realized something quietly comforting. There was now a way to live where being unnoticed wasn't a flaw. It was efficient. I had worked from home for years. My job existed entirely on a screen. I logged in, I completed tasks, I attended meetings. When the laptop closed, my workday ended without goodbyes or lingering conversations. Groceries were delivered, sometimes small orders, fruit, milk, bread. Sometimes full restocks in heavy paper bags stacked neatly outside my door. I didn't even need to sign for them. A delivery photo appeared in my app. That was enough. Rent was on autopay. Utilities were automatic. My mail went to a digital inbox. Packages were placed outside quietly. I picked them up when the hallway was empty. There was no need to go downstairs unless I wanted to, and I rarely wanted to.
It wasn't loneliness, it was comfort. My apartment was small but steady. A desk by the window, a sofa that had moulded slightly to my shape, a lamp that cast a warm circle of light every evening. I knew how the floorboards felt under my feet at night. I knew exactly how long the shower took to warm up. For a long time, the building around me provided a soft reminder that I wasn't alone. The elevator stopping, a door closing, a cough through the wall, footsteps passing my apartment. The sounds were never intrusive. They were simply there, background life. I never thought about them until they faded. The first time I noticed something was different, it was subtle. I had been sitting at my desk late one evening, the room lit only by the small lamp near the couch. I paused my work and realized I hadn't heard a single door open all day. That wasn't unusual on its own, but when I listened carefully, there was nothing else either. No footsteps, no plumbing, no distant television, no elevator, just the refrigerator humming. The silence stretched wider than usual. I told myself people were away. It was a common time of year for travel. Or perhaps several tenants had moved out at once. Buildings went through phases. It made sense. After all, I hadn't seen anyone in weeks. But I also hadn't gone downstairs in weeks. When you don't participate in the rhythms of a building, it's easy to assume they're continuing without you. Over the next few days, the quiet became consistent. I found myself listening more often, turning off background noise just to confirm that it was still there. It wasn't.
Then the small changes began. The heat fluctuated. One night the apartment felt overly warm. The next it felt faintly cold along the walls. The shower water took longer to warm, not dramatically longer, just enough to make me stand there waiting. The internet lagged occasionally. Video calls froze for a second or two before reconnecting. None of it felt urgent. Buildings aged, systems failed, maintenance schedules shifted. Everything still functioned. I still had what I needed. Later that evening, I walked to the window overlooking the inner courtyard. Across from me, the balconies were dark. No warm lights behind curtains, no silhouettes moving from room to room, just rows of blank windows. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The glass blurred the outlines of the building opposite mine until it looked like a smudged reflection. I tried to remember the last time I had seen someone out there watering plants, or smoking on a balcony, or talking quietly on the phone. I couldn't. The thought felt strange, but not frightening, just distant. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual. I woke to the building moving. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The bed shifted slightly beneath me, just enough to pull me toward consciousness. Then it happened again, a deep mechanical vibration rising through the floor. The room was completely dark. The power had never come back. My phone was dead. The air felt stale and unmoving. I stayed still and listened. There were no voices in the hallway, no doors opening, no footsteps running down the stairs, just a low mechanical sound somewhere outside, followed by a deep cracking noise that travelled upward through the structure. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Another impact landed below, and this time the walls responded. Not violently, just enough that I felt the shift in my bones. They weren't repairing something. They were taking it apart. I sat up and swung my feet to the floor, moving carefully as if the apartment had become unfamiliar. When I opened the front door, the hallway was completely black. No emergency lighting, no faint green exit sign. The air smelled faintly of dust, like a space that hadn't been walked through in days. My footsteps echoed in a way they never had before.
Halfway down the corridor, I noticed a sheet of paper on the floor. It lay flat against the carpet, slightly curled at one corner, as though it had been pushed under a door and never retrieved. I picked it up. The print was clear. Notice of demolition. Final clearance confirmed. I read it twice, and slowly I understood what that meant. They didn't know I lived there.
At some point, during a management change or a transfer of records, or when the building's data had been consolidated into some larger system, my name had disappeared. And since my life required no physical interaction with anyone in the building, no one noticed the mistake. My rent had continued to leave my account, my utilities had remained active, deliveries had arrived without conversation. In every system that mattered, I was already gone. And when the building fell, no one would notice that someone had still been there. The next impact came, and this time the building didn't shudder, it gave.
Story 10. She stood at the window.
We broke up on a Thursday. Not in a dramatic way, no plates, no screaming, just that exhausted, hollow kind of argument where every sentence feels like it's already been said before. "I can't keep doing this," Emma said. She packed a small suitcase. Not all her things, just enough to make it believable. When the door shut, it didn't slam, it clicked. Clean. Final. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after she left. The overhead light hummed faintly. The sink dripped once, then stopped. Around 9, it started raining. I slept on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, Emma was in bed beside me. For a few seconds, I didn't think anything of it. My brain just filled in the blank. She cooled off. She came back. She rolled onto her side. "I'm sorry," she said. "I overreacted." Her voice sounded steady, almost rehearsed. "You came back late?" I asked. "You were asleep." That seemed possible. We'd done this before, broken up, repaired it, pretended nothing cracked. I didn't question it. That's the part I keep coming back to. I didn't question it. When I left for work, she didn't walk me to the door. She was standing in the kitchen, by the window. The lights were off. I assumed she was just watching the rain. From the sidewalk, I looked up out of habit. She was there, a dark shape against the darker glass, standing perfectly still, facing outward. I lifted my hand in a small wave. She didn't move. I told myself she probably couldn't see me clearly. When I came home that evening, I looked up again. She was there. Same position, same darkness, the kitchen light off. I felt something small shift inside me then. Not fear, just imbalance. When I unlocked the door, the apartment was warmly lit. Emma was on the couch. "Hey," she said. Normal. I didn't mention the window. The next morning she stood there again, and that night, and the night after. Every time I left, she was in the dark. Every time I came home, she was already inside. Once I asked what she'd done that day. "Nothing much," she said. She blinked less than usual, paused slightly before answering. Small things, the kind you can explain away if you try hard enough. On Monday, I took the back alley home. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to surprise her. Maybe I wanted to see if the pattern held. The alley runs behind the building. You can't see the kitchen window from there. I unlocked the door quietly. The apartment was dark. No TV, no lamp. Just the faint grey light of late afternoon through the window. Emma was standing in the kitchen, facing outward, completely still. The lights were off. She didn't react when the door closed, didn't turn when I set my keys down.
I stood behind her for a long moment. "Emma," I said. She didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned her head. Not startled, not confused, just adjusting. "Oh," she said, "you're home." Like she hadn't been expecting that. That night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. No sound woke me, just the feeling of being watched. Emma lay on her back beside me, eyes open, looking directly at me. Not angry, not emotional, just observing. "How long have you been awake?" I whispered. "A while," she said. She didn't blink. Saturday morning we were both in the kitchen. Rain again. The city washed grey and quiet. She sat across from me at the table, hands folded, watching. My phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I felt something cold settle into my chest. I looked at her. She looked back. No reaction. I answered. "Hello?" Her voice came through, slightly distorted by the speaker. "I was thinking of coming by today to pick up the rest of my stuff. Is that okay?" I couldn't speak for a moment. "You're here," I said. "What?" "You came back Friday." "No," she said. "I left Thursday. I've been at my mum's." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. I looked up. She was still sitting there, hands folded, listening. Not confused, not afraid, just present. There was a knock at the door, sharp, real. I stood slowly. My legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I opened the door. Emma stood there, rain in her hair, eyes tired, alive in a way the other one wasn't. "Hey," she said cautiously. Behind me a floorboard creaked. We both heard it. Very slowly, I turned. The chair across from the table was empty. The kitchen was darker than it should have been. The overhead light flickered once. Emma grabbed my arm. "Who are you talking to?" I didn't answer. Later, after she collected her things and left again, this time for real, I stood outside the building in the rain. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. The kitchen light was off, but there was a shape in the window, standing, facing outward, waiting for someone to appear at the end of the street. I didn't go back inside. I don't live there anymore, but sometimes when I pass the building at night, the silhouette is still there.
Story 11. Patches. I didn't plan on becoming an influencer. I know people say that, but I really didn't. I never had a strategy, never imagined brand deals or PR packages or any of that. I just started posting because it gave shape to my days. When you live alone and work from home, it helps to have markers. Something that says, this moment mattered. My apartment isn't special. One bedroom, small kitchen, large window facing another building, neutral colours, plants I forget to water. Most of my content is filmed within the same 3 square meters because that's where the light is best. People often comment on how calm my videos feel. They say things like, "Your space feels safe," or "This feels like a quiet corner of the internet." I think that's because my life is actually pretty small, repetitive, predictable. I wake up around 7, coffee, laptop, phone. I film in the late morning, edit in the afternoon, post in the evening. That's it. So when my following started growing, slowly but steadily, it felt manageable. Not overwhelming, just validating. Like maybe the way I lived wasn't as invisible as it felt. The first PR package arrived on a Tuesday. No warning, no email,
just a plain cardboard box waiting outside my door when I went to take out the trash. My name and address were written neatly on the label, no logo. Inside was a smaller box, white and matte, heavier than I expected. It felt expensive without being flashy. There was also a folded card, thick paper, handwritten. "We think you'd genuinely like this. No obligation. Just try it." The product was a set of thin, skin-coloured patches. Sleep patches. Natural ingredients, apparently. You wore one behind your ear at night. I'd seen similar things online, but never tried them. Normally I ignore unsolicited PR, but something about this didn't trigger my usual skepticism. Maybe because there was no request attached, no post by this date, no contract, just try it. I didn't post about it right away. I told myself I wanted to see if it actually did anything first. The first night I used one, I slept through the entire night without waking up once. That almost never happens to me. The second night, the same thing. Deep sleep, no racing thoughts, no half dreams where I wake up already tired. By the third morning, I felt lighter, clearer, not euphoric, just rested. That's when I posted. Nothing dramatic, just a short video in my kitchen, morning light, coffee brewing in the background. I mentioned the patch casually, the way I mention things I actually use. The response was better than average. Not viral, but noticeably warmer. More comments, longer ones, people thanking me. The brand emailed me that afternoon. They said they'd seen my post, that they appreciated how natural it felt, that they weren't interested in a one-off collaboration, but something slower, more intentional. They attached no contract, just an invitation to talk. I remember reading the email twice, feeling oddly calm, like this was the next logical step, not a big decision. The call was brief, polite, professional. The person I spoke to never used my full name, just my first. They said they believed in creators who understood pace and sustainability. They didn't want to burn me out. They wanted to support my routine, not disrupt it. They offered a monthly retainer, enough to say no to other collaborations, enough to simplify things. All they asked was consistency and honesty. It sounded reasonable. I said yes. The next package arrived 2 days later. More patches. A handwritten note thanking me for trusting them. They included a suggested usage schedule, phrased gently. Recommended, not required. I followed it. Why wouldn't I? I felt better than I had in months. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a rhythm. I slept well, filmed easily. My content felt smoother, more grounded. Engagement increased in small but steady ways. Nothing suspicious, just progress. The company checked in occasionally, not daily, not invasive, just quick messages asking how I was feeling, whether I noticed any changes. Sometimes their timing was strange. They'd ask if I was feeling low on days when I was, or mention mental fatigue right before I'd planned to take a day off. I assumed they were reading my posts closely. That's what good partners do, right? One evening, after a long day of filming, I sat on my bed scrolling through my phone and realized something that made my stomach tighten. I couldn't remember the last time I'd skipped the patches. Not because I wasn't allowed to, because the idea of not using them made me uneasy. I told myself that was normal. That's what happens when something works. That night, I dreamt I was standing in my apartment, holding my phone up trying to record. The screen kept going dark. Every time I tapped it, a message appeared.
The next morning, another package was waiting outside my door. I hadn't ordered it. Inside were more patches, enough for weeks, and a new card. We noticed you've been pushing yourself. Remember, you don't have to. I sat on the floor with the box in my lap for a long time, staring at the handwriting. It was the same as before. Neat, familiar, like someone who knew me well. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Brands personalize communication all the time, and that part of it wasn't strange. And the patches worked. That much was undeniable. I slept better, filmed more easily, and felt calmer than I had in years. If something felt off, I assumed it was just my own resistance to success. But once the thought formed, it wouldn't go away. What if I wasn't just using the product? What if the product was shaping me? The realization didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, through small moments that were easy to dismiss. The way I reached for the patch automatically every night without thinking. The way my chest tightened when I realized I was running low. The way I hesitated before making plans that might interfere with my routine. One evening, I didn't apply one. I told myself it was just a test, just to see what would happen. I slept terribly. Not in the sense that I couldn't sleep at all, but like my body never fully shut down. My thoughts raced. My skin felt wrong, like it didn't quite fit. When I woke up, my head was heavy and my hands were slightly shaky. I filmed anyway. The footage was awful. My voice sounded strained, my movements felt unnatural, and I couldn't settle into the rhythm that usually came so easily. Editing took twice as long, and when I finally posted, it was later than usual. The response came quickly. Lower views, shorter watch time. Comments asking if I was okay, if something felt different. A few people said the video felt off, even if they couldn't explain why. That night, a message arrived from the company. We noticed a dip in performance today. Did you adjust your routine? I didn't respond. The next day, I skipped the patch again. By midday, my anxiety was overwhelming. Not panic exactly, but something worse. A restless, crawling discomfort that made it impossible to sit still. My body felt exhausted and wired at the same time, like it had forgotten how to regulate itself. I couldn't focus. I couldn't film. When I finally forced myself to record something, it was worse than the day before. Engagement dropped further. I lost followers. A few comments expressed disappointment, subtle but unmistakable. Another message arrived. Your audience is sensitive to shifts in energy. Consistency is important. I typed out a reply and deleted it, then typed again. I'm taking a break from the product. There was a longer pause than usual. Then the response came. We understand the impulse, but stopping abruptly can be destabilizing. They didn't threaten me. They didn't argue. They didn't need to, because I already understood. That night, I didn't sleep at all. My skin prickled constantly, my thoughts looped, and I felt strangely disconnected from my own body, as if I was watching myself from a distance. Around 4 a.m, I opened my laptop and watched my recent videos back to back. The difference was impossible to ignore. With the patches, I looked calm, grounded, easy to watch. Without them, I seemed restless, flat, and uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't know whether I was actually better with them or simply more palatable. The next morning, I checked my analytics. Every metric was down. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried, not because I missed the patches, but because I saw how quickly everything unraveled without them. The content, the engagement, the version of myself people wanted.
That afternoon, a new package arrived. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what was inside. More patches, a carefully measured supply, enough to stabilize me. The note was brief. We recommend resuming gradually. Your audience misses you. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about stopping completely, deleting everything, walking away. Then I imagined trying to live like this, feeling like this, while watching my work deteriorate in real time as thousands of people noticed. That night, with shaking hands, I applied the patch. The relief came quickly. My body softened, my thoughts slowed. The constant buzzing panic faded into the background. The next video I filmed was good, better than good. Engagement rebounded, comments returned to normal. People said they were glad I seemed like myself again. The company didn't message. They didn't have to, because I understood now. I wasn't collaborating with them. I was dependent on them.